Hey, Father Michael here. A lot on my mind and heart this morning, to be honest. I'm kind of thinking about my family, my past, my East European grandfather that I loved, and watching the news cycle over the last week or so, wondering how he would react to everything that's happening in Ukraine and Russia if he were still alive. I posted his picture once on social media and, giving him a shout out, a bit of recognition and gratitude for who he was and for the significant role he played in my life. And I was frankly stunned to get quite a bit of feedback from people telling me that I resembled him physically and in the way I lived my life. Well, that made me feel good, even though I don't think it's true so much. When I lived with him and my grandmother for a time as a young adult, people would, of course, see us together all the time. And so they came to associate me with him and him with me. And so on those days, if I went to the supermarket or the hardware store by myself, invariably somebody would ask me how my dad was doing. And I was overwhelmingly pleased with that misidentification because, to be honest, I really wanted him to be my dad. And so I never corrected anybody when they made that mistake. And I would just say, oh, Dad is doing fine, and go about my business. I don't think I looked like him at all. He was blonde with blue eyes. And had a crooked pirate smile, and I'm clearly not blonde. I don't have blue eyes, and I just have a plain old ordinary smile. Anyway, thinking about my grandfather for a couple reasons. The first, like I said, is that brewing trouble in East Europe, and the second really is because I just happened to have my evening meal last night, my supper, in a restaurant that has been around since 1946. I only know that because all the employees were wearing t-shirts that said that on them. And so there I am. David and I are catching a late supper, and straight up, we had to have been in the top 10% of the youngest people in the place, or at least the youngest looking. The owner of this restaurant had originally dubbed this place the Prime Rib Restaurant, but I didn't smell any prime rib, and I'm pretty sure there weren't that many people with enough teeth left to actually chew prime rib. I was surrounded mostly by a sea of gray and white haired people, some of them quite feeble, more walkers and canes than I would normally see in a month, I would say, to be honest. And so I kind of humorously thought to myself, they shouldn't call this the senior menu. They should call this the mortality menu, because clearly everybody in here, with a few exceptions, everybody in here is kind of on the short list when it comes to meeting their maker. But it also kind of made me think seriously about this whole mortality business for myself. I mean, am I going to be one of those old guys with, mismatched shirt and pants and white socks and dress shoes shuffling down the hallway. Am I going to live long enough to even need a cane or a walker? Am I someday going to be so stooped over with arthritis that I will be, struggling to make it down the hallway? And will I end up someday so isolated, living by myself, that even a short trip to a restaurant offering pretty bland fare, will that become a rare treat for me? Lots of stuff to think about while I'm waiting for my food. But as I looked around the room, there were a few families gathered there, 3 generations, possibly 4, at the same table. And as I kind of, watched them interact, because I love watching people, you can crack yourself up for days watching people do funny things, especially when they don't think you're looking. So I'm one of those guys, always observing. It's where I get my best material for sermons and such too, I think. So I'm watching people, and as I'm watching these families, and I'm kind of tripping down the rabbit hole of nostalgia, because I'm remembering all those years, when I was part of that situation, when I was there with grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts, great uncles, nephews, nieces, cousins, etc., etc. But as I'm watching them, I'm also noticing that sometimes it's pretty easy to spot who is the child of whom. There's some physical similarities sometimes between the family members that were kind of obvious. So it was clear to me, for example, that over to my left, the dark-haired, balding son with the loud, annoying toddler was clearly the son of the older man. And at another table across the room, it was pretty obvious that the guy with the wavy white hair and the prominent nose was undoubtedly the father of the middle-aged woman with that same wavy hair and the same nose. And again, I remembered that earlier Facebook post where I posted Grandpa's pic and those comments that were made telling me that I resembled him. And I wonder if the average person looking at us and observing us when we don't think they're looking, seeing the way we act, behave in public and in private, I wonder if they recognize the presence of God in us. This all comes down, I think, to that scriptural mandate in the Christian scriptures to love God and love each other. John 13, 34 and 35, just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you just have love for one another. I've got Eastern European blood in me. Just a tinge from, sources that I can locate in my memory. But in fact, and quite surprisingly, the largest amount of my DNA is 17% Ukrainian. There are no Ukrainians in my family that I know of, but clearly there are. I also served as a diak and deacon in a Ukrainian Byzantine parish for a decade or so. And so I know something about Ukrainians. I know a lot about Ukrainian hospitality and unconditional love. Even for me, an outsider, they called me the Greek boy because I had come from the Melkite group, part of the Byzantine churches. Didn't know at the time that I actually shared some genetic material with them. I didn't know about the DNA stuff until many years later. And when I found out, it made me wonder if maybe that isn't the reason why I connected so deeply with the foods and the traditions and the music and the liturgical cycles of Ukrainian Christianity. Is that genetic memory on some level? I don't know. It kind of feels like it is. So for me then, this is kind of a wandering journey this morning, yesterday's lessons were clear enough for a change. This life is a short ride, and we do not know how it's going to end. All the things that we stress about and worry about and try to control and all of that is going to fade away. But what will remain, even when we are not here physically, are the ripples that we leave behind from loving other people. The ways in which we resemble the face of God in the day-to-day muck and mire of this life. Those little things that we did in a loving way are going to be remembered and talked about long after we are gone. And we may even be an inspiration to others to love in the same way and to just do the next right thing. So today, the world poised on what seems to be inevitable war and violence. A prayer for peace. In Old Slavonic, no less, the language that I learned while ministering to the Ukrainians. Peace, for peace in Ukraine, for peace in all of Eastern Europe, which has already seen literally centuries of heartache and violence. But also a prayer for each one of us. That today, starting now, we might make more peaceful choices. That people today, starting right now, will see the face of God in us by the way we love. Let's pray. Единородный Сын и Слово Божье. Смертенці споливе спасення нашого ради. Воплотитися. От святih Богородиці і присну Діві Марію. Непреложного чоловічевиця. Растни сяже, Христе Боже наш. Смертю смерть поправ. Єдинці святія Тройці. Спрославля Ці, Отцу і Святому Духу. Amen. Be the face of God today.